Now 296 days since Israeli forces killed Hinder Job, the medic sent to save our family members. What update do you have on this investigation?
I don't have an update today.
Okay, so if there is no update on a case that's 296...
Well, but remember, I mean, the reason we don't have an update in the case, I think you know, the last time we talked about this, I talked to you about what we had found in talking to the various parties in the region, which is the Israelis say that they reached out to the relevant NGOs for information. The NGOs failed to provide that. I can't speak on behalf of either the Israelis or the NGOs about what is true and what isn't, but that's what we've been told by the parties.
Right, yes. And as we've discussed, when we reached out to those parties, they...
Correct, and I can't speak to the veracity of that on behalf of either party.
Right, but given this uncertainty in the air of weapons that the U.S. has sent to Israel, how can the U.S. be prepared to send more of the same rounds Israel reportedly used to kill Hinder Job if all these days later it can't get to some sort of conclusion on such a well-known case?
Well, again, I'm just with respect to the premise, I think there is an underlying factual dispute that I can't speak to. So I think we need to let's set aside the premise of the question for a minute and just get into the overall question. We continue to support Israel's right to defend itself against a persistent threat from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies. Now, at the same time, we continue to insist that Israel take all precautions to minimize civilian harm, to protect civilians, and I do think it's always worth pointing out that they are operating in a really unprecedented battlefield where they're having to fight against a terrorist enemy that hides behind civilians and hides underneath civilian homes and buildings. It doesn't minimize Israel's responsibility, but it makes it extremely difficult.
But this dispute is the point. It's not like the factual dispute is something that is of concern to the U.S. if it is giving weapons to a country for which it's unclear what happened when they killed civilians. Is that not kind of the point?
So the factual dispute with respect to this one incident, but there are a number of incidents of civilian harm, of course. This has been a tragic war, a horrific war that has left thousands and thousands of civilians dead. And the human toll has been an absolute catastrophe, which is why we continue to insist that Israel do more despite the tough conditions that they face. But it's also why we have put the diplomatic efforts of the United States behind trying to end this war and trying to get a ceasefire that would lead to the release of hostages and would lead to an end of the suffering of the Palestinian people. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do because this human toll has really been horrific and because we want to see a lasting security situation that doesn't just end the war for a week or for a month, but that provides lasting security for both Israelis and Palestinians.
So you talk about these broad efforts to, encourage the Israeli government to minimize civilian toll, as you say, in a tough environment. How can the government take these suggestions or demands seriously if they are, in effect, suggestions? For instance, we saw last week, after a 30-day deadline that the U.S. gave Israel to improve conditions in Gaza, 8 humanitarian organizations found that about 15 of those demands were failures or were insufficient.
Let me just cut you off there before, because I know it's a long question, but if you're referring to the scorecard that humanitarian groups put out last week, there were a number of, you just look through, they went through and had like red light, green light, they had a number of different assessments. There were a number of those that were just factually wrong. For example, they said that the Mawasi humanitarian zone had not been expanded. In fact, it has been expanded by around 25%. They said that there had been no progress on humanitarian pauses. In fact, pauses are being instituted. Now, we want to see pauses longer, but there are some factual things wrong about that scorecard. So we got to set the record straight before going off the question.
But so was that deadline for progress or for achievements?
The deadline was to see both, in fact, and we did see significant progress, and we saw new achievements at the end of that letter. I think that people have, in some senses, misunderstood why we sent that letter. We sent that letter to introduce a sense of urgency to the situation and to produce action, and it has produced action. We have seen Israel take steps. 12 of the 15 areas, and I went through some of those the last couple days. I don't think I need to go through all of them here again, though I'm happy to if I need to. And there are other things that we continue to press them to take more progress on. Now, what we really want to see is that progress actually translate to results on the ground, which means trucks getting to people, and they're having to get to people in a difficult security situation where trucks are being looted, and we want to see it sustained, and that's what we continue to focus on.
So for people in northern Gaza who are on the brink of famine, they're just supposed to look at this progress?
So there have been trucks that have been going into northern Gaza because of the U.S. intervention. in this matter because of the letter that we sent. For weeks, there were no trucks going to northern Gaza. You were correct about that. And that's one of the reasons we sent the letter, because we found that situation to be unacceptable. And as a result of our intervention, Israel began to again allow trucks to go into northern Gaza, including in the areas where there's direct fighting that had been closed off for weeks. That happened because of the letter we sent.
Finally, just what does it say that such insistent intervention is needed for a key ally to allow even the potential avoidance of?
It says that we need to stick at it, and we're going to stick to it.